Yeah, I just want to talk about what I mean by innovation commons, because
Yeah.
there's two words there. There's innovation and commons. Innovation is growth of knowledge. Commons is a type of organization, is a way of organizing people around resources. So we can organize people and resources with property rights, where we go, this is mine, this is yours. Property rights enable us to have markets. Right? So you can't have markets without property rights, because a market is an exchange mechanism that transfers property rights. I give you my thing, you give me something else. So property rights gives us markets. Firms are another way to organize people with hierarchy. So you have someone giving instructions, rules, passing rules down. You will do this, down. So we can use hierarchical organization. A government is also a hierarchical organization. That's a compulsory one. A firm is a voluntary one. So we've got voluntary hierarchy, compulsory hierarchy, property rights and markets. The other form of organization are commons. And a commons is an institution where we've got some rules about how we're going to govern our use of a shared resource. So a commons is an institution built around a common pool resource. So that resource might be a traditional one is a forest, where we are hunting in it, or gathering berries in it, or whatever, or a fisheries, or a watershed, or access to water, or the atmosphere that we breathe. So a commons is a way of coordinating a group of people, a social institution, around a resource. But that resource could also be privately held. We could turn this into a market, or it could be publicly held. We could turn it into a public good. The thing about a common is that a commons is, in many situations, a very efficient way to organize humans, because what it does is it trades on the idea of a community. And there's a group of people that already know each other, that trust each other, that can, at very low cost, coordinate their use of a shared resource. So we tend to see commons work quite well. We have stable communities. So access to a community resource, a community garden, for instance, can be a commons. The sidewalk can be a commons. But commons, the problem with commons is, plural, is that they're subject to free riding. I can go in and just take all the berries in the forest, and now there's none for you. So you've got to have a way of punishing me or restraining my free riding on that. At some point, property rights, I can take you to court, or public goods, I can put you in prison, are solutions to that problem. But they're high-cost solutions. It's expensive to run a property rights system. 1 in every 10 people in your population has to be a lawyer. It's expensive to run a government. 1 in every 10 people in your population has to be a politician or a policeman or whatever with that. So, the public goods and the market society ones are both solutions, but they're relatively expensive solutions. The thing about a commons, when it works well, is it's efficient and very low cost. The problem with commons is that they don't scale very well. They tend to work well for small groups. They don't tend to work well for big groups. This is why the commons in a street around, can we just have a shared park amongst the people in my street, will probably work pretty well, but it completely fails for CO2 in the global atmosphere. It's also a commons that we've just ruined. It's easy for me to pollute it, and it's difficult for you to punish me. So that's a commons. Innovation commons, put this together and just go. So to me, the fundamental question in not just economics, but in society is, how do we grow knowledge? What is the best way to grow knowledge? Because everything depends on that. If we've got effective institutions for growing knowledge, we can do anything. We can solve every problem. We can make poverty go away. We can make all health problems. Everyone can have everything they want. We can solve the economic problems you define it. We can live on Mars. We can do whatever. Right? The growth of knowledge is the fundamental constraint on human flourishing. So this is why the innovation problem, and again, this is why I'm very much agree with Mazzucato that putting innovation as the fundamental thing government has to get right is absolutely correct. It's the central economic problem. It's not just the allocation of scarce resources. I don't buy that at all. The central economic problem is, how do we grow knowledge to make scarcity go away? So the organization or the institutions of innovation is the fundamental question we should be asking in economics. And this brings us to this, okay, so how do we organize innovation? And, well, we have firms. Firms create, new ideas and they try and push them to market. And for that, we need effective property rights and markets and venture capital. And, we need a whole lot of, our market institutions need to work very well if firms are going to be the mechanism we're going to use to grow knowledge. Public science, universities, government research departments have produced a huge amount of knowledge. And this was what Mariana Mazzucato was pointing to when she showed her iPhone and said, look, most of this was built in government research departments. True, but it was commercialized. It was the innovations took place in the market. So we could rely more on public funding. We could use that mechanism. But if that's the case, we need to politicize innovation. We need to basically deal with this question of, okay, what should we be innovating on? Vote this way. That could work. I'm less trustful of that because voting tends to. I'm not a huge fan of voting if the objective is to
new things. That's the whole. It kind of goes against the general aim. Like novelty is interesting because it's new and kind of well, technically it is new, but it's surprising, right? Like the whole point is like one person has a crazy idea and it just so happens to be awesome. At the beginning, everyone thinks it's madness.
And that's always the case. So you don't want to be a politician proposing new ideas. That's the worst possible position, or backing new ideas. So, I mean, it would probably work pretty well if we politicized innovation and have large research departments doing it. And in a lot of ways, that's what universities are. Universities are a very old institution. They've been around for almost 1,000 years because they work at growing knowledge. So we have got a significant societal investment in that mechanism. We've also got a huge societal investment in using markets and property rights and intellectual property and venture capital. And Silicon Valley is evidence of the enormous success of that. The problem for me, though, is that it's even harder than that. So entrepreneurs are a key mechanism in coming up with new ideas and driving them. But the question is, where do entrepreneurs get their ideas from? How do they see opportunities? And my argument around the innovation commons is that the very notion of even seeing opportunities, what can we do with this knowledge, is itself a collective action problem that requires cooperation. And now, one solution is that we just rely on genius entrepreneurs. So we go, Elon Musk, fantastic, come up with more ideas, Elon. Or we go back in history and we go, okay, Bill Gates or Steve Jobs. We rely on the genius entrepreneur that can have all of the ideas. But that's a pretty risky strategy, and it's putting all our eggs in a very small number of baskets and just hoping that we've got the right geniuses in the right place at the right time to have the right ideas and start the right companies. And what my belief is, and my evidence for this is things like open source software, is that by far the best technologies we've got weren't actually created by single geniuses, but were basically built by groups of people working cooperatively together. Just, I'll build this prison, you build that prison. No one's actually in charge. And wow, we've got Wikipedia, or wow, we've got, we've got Linux or whatever, right? And I think it's the same thing with innovation and entrepreneurship. Is that a lot of ideas aren't the product of lone genius. We tend to ascribe that after the event and point to that. But there's a reason that there are certain places are just more fertile than others. And at the moment, sort of Silicon Valley is our favorite example. But historically, there have been lots of other places. Venice in the 16th century, or Amsterdam in the 17th century, and so on, where there was just a lot of activity. There was a lot of just people gathering in coffee houses, or people gathering in these sort of places where people came together and shared ideas. Those were commonses. They were commonses of ideas where ideas came together. In a lot of ways, the success of a university is the fact that you just put a lot of smart people in the same space and sort of ideas percolate and they share, and eventually someone takes credit for it. So it looks after the event like one person innovated that. But this idea of institutions for creating idea discovery as a common pool resource, I think this is what I mean by an innovation commons. And what that means is that I have a conception here of fundamental cooperation to pool bits of ideas, or I've seen this, or I saw that bit, or I've got a solution to that. And this is Adam Smith. We specialize. We know you'll have things that you know. I've got things that I know. But when we come together, we can pool and share that information and realize new ideas or new breakthroughs, or we can see new opportunities. And that notion of thinking of idea discovery or value discovery or opportunity discovery as a common pool resource that we can build is a large part of what really successful startups have. That I'm describing a cultural phenomenon. I'm describing a phenomena of a successful human cooperation as a cultural institution to discover ideas. And to me, that's the answer to the question: what is driving all of what is the ultimate driver of innovation? It's not lone genius, it's not finance, it's not venture capital, or it's not R&D tax credits that are sponsoring companies that have already. All of that is already down the path. When you're at that stage, you've already kind of spotted the opportunity. The real scarcity is coming up with these mechanisms for seeing opportunities or discovering sources of value by pooling and creating knowledge. So I very much see this as, to loop back, one of the critiques that people often make of capitalism is that it's competitive in a bad way that's wasteful and harmful. I think that fundamentally misunderstands this institutional system we call a market economy. It's fundamentally a cooperative society that uses competition between cooperative groups to accelerate it. But the fundamental binding energy of a market society is high quality trust and cooperation between people pooling and sharing ideas. That's a firm at its best. All of the sources of wealth and value creation have that property. Now, sometimes we ascribe that to a place and go, there's some magic about this region, or that particular geography, or that place at a particular time, and just go, I can't believe so many good ideas come out of San Francisco or New York or Venice or whatever. No, it's not the geography that's doing that. It's that was a place where groups of people were able to come together and trust each other and cooperate and share at low cost. What those places tend to not have is a whole lot of protection or intellectual property rights, or this is mine. They're often very cooperative, open, sharing places. This is a thing that you notice about them. It's not an accident. It's not a side feature of it. A lot of these mechanisms of intellectual property, I'm very much against intellectual property. I think it's ultimately harmful for innovation.
I was going to ask you that, but keep on going.
But I mean, it's a thing that you need in place in order to get property rights mechanisms to work, in order to get markets to work. So, but again, that only happens once you've got the engine running, once you've got this engine of discovery running. So, I mean, what this leads me to is this idea that the fundamental question in economics is where does innovation come from? That's the driver of it. That is fundamentally an answer. That is fundamentally a question that has an institutional answer. It's not an allocation of capital. It's a design of institutions to facilitate cooperation. And when you have that high quality institutions that facilitate the sharing and pooling of ideas to create a common pool resource that enables opportunity and idea discovery or technology discovery. And sometimes this will take place within a firm. Sometimes, a really great firm, for a while there, Google looked like this from the inside. I'm not sure if it still does. Back in the 70s, the Bell Research Laboratories in New York were like that, or Xerox PARC in San Francisco. But there have been firms that have had looked like this. A high-performing research team at a university has the same feel to it. A really great sort of consulting company that is just can also do this. So lots of firms can look like this, but so can places, regions, geographies, spaces. But in each case, what you're describing is a a community of people that are able to safely cooperate and pool and share ideas to create a common resource that enables them to discover new technologies, new ideas, new opportunities, new ways of behaving. And some of these things look nothing like, you don't think of them as the economy. Some of these things might look a bit cult-like. Some of the greatest ideas of the 20th century actually weirdly came out of hippie communes and places, because they had the same underlying property of it was safe to cooperate, to pool ideas, to create new resources. I've spent a lot of time studying the origin of new sports, such as mountain biking, or we were doing kite surfing recently, and it's the same thing. Groups of enthusiasts come together to pool and share ideas about designs they've come up with, or just little modifications they've made, and out of that they build a new sport. What is a new sport is technologies plus rules for how to organize that, and off the back of that you get new companies and markets, and then and now we've got Barton snowboards and whatever mountain bikes. But the market, entrepreneurial finance, build a startup into a business, that's 17 steps down the line of innovation. It's not where it starts. It actually starts a lot sooner. And so I see the role of government here as stepping in to accelerate, stepping in to clean up any messes that are made. But to me, the real driver of this isn't government or firms or even brilliant entrepreneurs. The real driver of this is just safe, enthusiastic human cooperation around knowledge, around the creation of new knowledge. Again, I don't know what policy looks like when you do that, but it's not based around R&D tax credits or things. I think we accidentally get it right with universities, or at least we did in the past. I hope we will still do that. I'm more worried about the future of universities now. That and when you treat universities as businesses, you're kind of killing off that. So again, this I think it's easier for governments to mess this up than it is for them to get it right. But at least part of the plan here is, because what I'm describing here in a lot of ways is enlightened wastefulness, or a tolerant.
But see, in the long run, it's actually efficient, right? Like that's what evolution's like.
Well,
it's inefficient if you look at the isolated instance, but like the search costs, quite like. Evolution's kind of the only thing we've got for surviving across time, and it looks wasteful initially.
Right.
But
and that's a huge lesson that we take. That that evolutionary biology has taught us is that wow, that's wasteful, but on a short period of time, but on a long period of time, how did it do that? That's amazing, and it's
well, it brought us here, right?
Yeah. Well, so
billion years of that.
But I just take that as meaning experimentation. I mean, what we're dealing with is a growth of knowledge problems, meaning we're dealing with uncertainty and ignorance, and we're going to make mistakes and so on. And it's not so much we must avoid making mistakes. It's just we need to just lower the cost of making mistakes. We just need to, and when we discover new things, we need to figure out how to use them in such a way that we minimize the disruption that they cause. Or So I think a lot of economic policy tries to protect existing knowledge rather than try and facilitate the growth of knowledge. So, again, we shouldn't be protecting jobs. We should be protecting workers, or we should be protecting people.
It's something that kind of annoys me about some of the discourse around automation. That you're destroying these people's jobs, and I see it as liberation. It's like, well, these people actually don't be spending their time doing this anymore, and it's not the company's responsibility to ensure that they are okay. It's actually the role of the government. So your ire shouldn't be directed towards the companies. It should be directed towards the government and ensuring that everyone is taken care of and has has healthcare, basic needs.
I agree with that. I think that's the right framing of this. It's it requires a certain boldness, because you have to There's very clear lobbying. There's a person there that has a job and suffering and will vote against you if you do not offer to protect them. But I think this is a great lesson of the 20th century, was the costs of doing that. That more automation is coming, and it's not just going through the blue collar mechanical parts of it. It's coming for the white collar jobs. It's coming for all sorts of things.
For anyone listening out there who wants, if you're not aware of like probably the biggest development in artificial intelligence, at least I've ever seen, GPT-3. I mean, if you want to have your university essays written, just leave it to them. Leave it to GPT-3.
Beginning of this as well. So anyway, more disruption is coming, and we need to figure out how to flourish and make use of these new technologies. I mean, they are disruptive. There will be harmful ways of using them, but there will also be lots of amazing surprises that we can put these to. And I'm a big fan of an economist at George Mason University, Tyler Cohen. He's written a lot of quite, what I think are some very good works on this. But his point is, he points to chess and goes, the thing about chess computers is it's not that human beats chess computer and until they don't, or chess computer beats human and now forever. It's that the winning strategies right now, even in something as rule-bound as chess, is actually human and computer working together can beat anything. They can beat computer by itself or human by themselves. And that's a model for what this is going to look like in the future. Is that this automation that's coming out of machine learning and the Boston Dynamics dogs and whatever, right? Whatever's coming, is that what both history teaches us, and this will continue to be the case, is that it's not the case that just gradually the machines will take all the jobs and there'll be nothing left for the humans to do. It's that the humans will be made far more powerful and capable and find interesting new things to do with cooperating with machines. And the ability to do that, I think, is the fundamental capability that we need to develop here. And that's a role for education. That's a role that many people will need help with. I think this is the great digital divide, or this is the risk of leaving people behind, is if they can't effectively work with the new technologies. Not against them, not instead of them, but with them. And so I see, to my mind, it's education that is the thing that we need to reform most. And our education system is built around an industrial economy where you slot it into a system with a machine or with an organizational apparatus. I think we're starting to see shifts in universities now where we talk about lifelong learning and so on. I think that's a little bit glib and cliched, but this idea of needing to continuously retool to sort of stay at the front, or to learn how to work with whatever the latest thing is something that we're going to need to figure out how to do. Now, whether that's universities and credentials, whether it's podcasts, whether it's just groups of people coming together and teaching themselves, and do we need certification? I don't know. But I think the one missing piece of the puzzle right now is massive education reform in the education system. I think we're still living in a almost medieval education system that is it works well for some people, but there's a lot of people that it's failing and leaving huge amounts of debt and not a great deal of ability to function.
No. My experience and many of my contemporaries is just you pay for a piece of paper, and your education you get from YouTube.
Yeah.
So I just this discussion of innovation commons, the way that I kind of one of the key words that really stuck out to me was uncertainty. So the entrepreneur cannot go out and create if they can't go out and create if they don't have the inputs for the idea. So the role of the innovation commons, perhaps role is the wrong word, but it's this distributed network of individuals who have little pieces of what could be the puzzle, or even before the puzzle pieces, like little bits that when they're brought together, give an idea of what the opportunity could actually look like. So it's they're forging the puzzle pieces. And that's why it's so hard for the government to do it, because the government, they can't do that. All they can do is really create space for that in a way.
I like the way you put that. And I think that is, economists call that the knowledge problem. And the basic argument, and this was made very clearly by Hayek in an article, 1945, The Use of Knowledge in Society, is just simply that what markets are very good at doing is piecing together distributed knowledge. Because each person will know a little bit about local environment and conditions, and they'll have a little bit of insight into demand conditions here or supply conditions there. And by their actions in a market, they bid prices up and down. And prices are a mechanism for pooling that distributed knowledge so that anyone can look at the prices and sort of understand roughly how to coordinate their own action with respect to that. So in this sense, markets are a communication mechanism to coordinate distributed knowledge, right? But that's the general economic problem, is dealing with distributed knowledge. And it's also true in discovery of new knowledge. That, I'll have some insight into some things, and I might not even be aware of the value or the importance of what I have, or I might be thinking what I have is important and it's absolutely not. But I only know that. So what I've got is fundamental uncertainty about the value of what knowledge I have, what its significance is, and what to do with it. By mixing it with your knowledge, by mixing it with someone else's, we can start to reduce that uncertainty and start to figure out what we know, what we don't know. And through that, we can start to get more confidence about the value of the actions we might take. Actually, we should do this, not that. Once we're doing that, we can start to form a plan. Okay, I think we can do this. So uncertainty is reducing as we're doing this. Our confidence in our actions, our expectations are starting to form and rise. And once with this, we can now start to persuade other people. So I can start to go to someone with some other resources, capital or finance or a machine or access, and go, look, here's what we've figured out. Come join us, and we can do this together. And what you're observing there is this, as we're pooling knowledge, we're reducing uncertainty, we're building up expectations and plans. Those expectations and plans make it safer for others to cooperate with us and give us others more confidence. And at some point we go, all right, let's put a wrapper around this. That's a firm, right? So an institutional wrapper. Okay, we're going to do this. Off we go. We'll put a plan. And
I sort of see it as like. Oh, sorry. Continue.
What I'm just sort of describing there is that this is the in biology or in physics, this is the sort of cloud of gas collapsing into the beginnings of a star, or the sort of individual particles
seed
together and form something. But that very early stage process is it's in a world of fundamental uncertainty, and unless you've got a mechanism to reduce that uncertainty and start to form confidence for plans, we have no basis for economic action other than just doing what we were doing before. Right? So in the absence of that, we can't do anything new. We just have to keep doing what we were doing before. And, that was the feudal world, right? That was the world of that was 10,000 years till relatively recently ago. That was the world we lived in. We just kept doing the same stuff over and over again because we had no mechanism, no institutional mechanism to reduce uncertainty and enable us to form new plans. In fact, the only place that ever took place was usually in war. We're going to go and attack them. I've got an idea. So we saw innovation mostly directed towards stealing stuff or violence or not cooperation, the opposite of cooperation. And what is a market economy? A mechanism to harness those forces of cooperation and put it to use in discovering new ways of creating prosperity, which is incredible. So, again, I don't call that capitalism. I call that sort of an institutional market society for the growth of knowledge.
I like just discarding capitalism entirely because I think it just causes more problems than it actually solves. And I like this like what you were describing, this reduction of uncertainty. I sort of see it as like the sketching out of what the fitness landscape might be like. We're getting greater resolution about what viable solutions might actually look like, and then you get something to test. You see how it flies, and if it works, you adapt, and if it doesn't work, you adapt, and if it works, then you make a little more adjustments and you climb that hill.
So one of the arguments I make around innovation policy and the role of government and so on is that communication, that facilitating communicating that information to others is a fundamental, that needs to happen. Now, whether that's in an industry, that's the role of things like conferences or industry associations or trade media or secret societies of people coming together to share information, or maybe down at the pub afterwards. But there's just spaces of safe cooperation to share information and knowledge, are not incidental. We tend to not treat that as the fundamental thing that's driving this, but it just so happens that every time those things work, we get success. And I think I see a fundamental role of government in coordinating that or underwriting that, because those are costs that suffer a common poor resource, the tragedy of the commons problem. It's easy to free ride on that. It's easy for me not to share my information with anyone else. But if there's a way of lowering the cost of me doing it, or incentivizing me to do that, or creating a mechanism for me to share that information more broadly. Now again, universities are good at that. I like it when governments sponsor networking events and traders, just ways of bringing people together to share knowledge. And the very best types of research institutions aren't just pushing the frontiers of quantum physics. They're also about creating institutions to bring people together to pool and share information. So, again, I like it when government does that sort of stuff. I think that's much underestimated, because it's not flash. You can't open an expensive cyclotron or whatever, or building or whatever. It just we hosted a networking event. But I think those things are fundamentally important, just because all the evidence points to the idea that stuff is where ideas come from.